If you've ever struggled to understand a specific term or community lingo within Darktide, then this video is for you. Here is a comprehensive dictionary of terms found both in the mechanics of the game as well as community-created terms. Keep an eye out for a Steam Guide version of this same dictionary, which, when finished, will be added down in the description and comments below. Strikedown is an attack that is meant to deal decent stagger and high single target damage to a single enemy. These attacks are most often vertical strikes or stabs, and can be found on weapons that have high single target damage like the combat axes. Relentless is an attack that is meant to control hordes due to decent amount of cleave and large amounts of stagger. These attacks are most often horizontal sweeping attacks, and can be found on weapons that have good horde controlling capabilities such as the Thunderhammers. Vanguard is an attack that is meant to deal damage to hordes due to a decent amount of stagger and high cleave potential. These attacks are most often diagonal sweeps or slashes, but can also include horizontal sweeping attacks. Vanguard can be found on weapons that deal high amounts of damage to hordes, such as the Heavy Eviscerators. Assassin is an attack that is meant to deal high single target damage via weak spot hits. These attacks often have low stagger power but a high finesse modifier, which means they deal increased damage on headshots or other weak spots. Assassin can be found on weapons designed with speed and finesse in mind, such as the dueling swords. Impact is an alternate term for stagger. Anything in Darktide that references impact refers to your power to stagger and knock down enemies, and anything that increases impact directly increases the stagger power of you and your weapons. There are 3 main stages of stagger, with a soft 4th. With light stagger power, your attacks will cause unarmored and lightly armored enemies to slightly flinch, which they will recover from fairly quickly. Your attacks will have no effect versus armored elites, ragers, or bosses of any kind. With medium stagger power, your attacks will cause unarmored and lightly armored enemies to visibly recoil, which they will recover from after an average amount of time. Your attacks will cause maulers and ragers to briefly flinch, while having no effect against Ogren enemies and bosses. Some weapons have special attacks that will cause enemy Ogrens to briefly flinch, most notably with Psyker's dueling swords and Veteran's Sapper Shovel. With heavy stagger power, your attacks will cause unarmored and lightly armored enemies to be thrown around and knocked to the ground, which will take them a long time to recover from. Your attacks will cause maulers, ragers, and Ogren enemies to visibly recoil and sometimes even topple over, but still will have no effect against monstrosities. With extreme stagger power, your attacks will have the same effect against enemies as with high stagger power, but you will be able to cause monsters to visibly recoil at your attacks. This extreme stagger power is oftentimes not possible to reach with weaponry and is reserved for class abilities and blitzes, such as Ogren's Charge or Veteran's Crack Grenades. Rending is a buff that allows your attacks to ignore a certain percentage of enemies' flak and carapace armor, with the amount ignored using the base damage of your weapon rather than the armor damage. Brittleness is a debuff that you place on an enemy to allow attacks to ignore a certain percentage of their armor. This is essentially identical to Rending, but allows your entire team to benefit from the armor bypass instead of just you. Damage refers to the amount of hit point damage a weapon does. A boost in damage will boost only the amount of hit points each attack reduces from an enemy. Power refers to the overall value of damage, stagger, and cleave potential your weapons have. A boost in power will simultaneously increase the overall damage, stagger power, and cleave your weapon has, making an increase in power a 3-in-1 buff. Finesse Modifier refers to a weapon's weak spot damage. Weapons with a high Finesse Modifier deal increased damage when hitting headshots and other weak points compared to weapons with low Finesse Modifiers. Dodge count refers to the maximum amount of dodges a weapon has before your dodges become less effective. Every weapon, both melee and ranged, has its own unique dodge count, and after exceeding that number, your dodges will become less and less effective until you cannot dodge anymore. Not dodging for roughly 1 second will reset your dodge count to its maximum value. Dodge dance is a community-driven term which refers to the act of dodging in a strict rhythm in order to avoid the most attacks possible. Dodge dancing is often used in context of engaging large hordes in melee or locking down Plague Ogrins and Beast of Nurgles to prevent them from moving. Cleave refers to the amount of enemies your attacks can pass through before being hard stopped, which is determined by the hitmass value an enemy has. Blessings that boost Cleave will boost the amount of enemies a weapon can cleave through before being hard stopped. Hitmass refers to a specific value of mass an enemy has that determines how many targets your weapon can cleave during a single attack. The lower an enemy's hitmass, the more enemies you can cleave through at once, whereas the higher an enemy's hitmass, the less enemies you can cleave through at once. Blessings that ignore hitmass are often more effective than blessings that boost cleave, as ignoring hitmass can allow for infinite cleave potential while boosting cleave still causes weapons to have a hard cap of cleave. Kite refers to the act of dragging an enemy or group of enemies away from your team in order to make it easier for them to survive. Kite is typically used in junction with bosses and hard-to-kill enemies like Crushers. Melee dodge linger window refers to a specific period of time after you finish dodging. While in this grace period, you are still counted as dodging versus melee attacks even though you are technically not dodging, which helps higher ping players to more consistently dodge melee attacks. Damage drop-off refers to ranged weapons that deal less damage the farther away you are from your target and more damage the closer you are. This most often refers to ballistic weapons such as the autoguns, bolters, or revolvers. Alternatively, reverse damage drop-off refers to weapons that deal less damage the closer you are to your target and more damage the farther you are. This most often refers to lasgun weapons. Attack combo refers to the mixing of a weapon's light, heavy, and push attacks in order to create attacks of varying directions, speeds, and intents. This is often confused for attack pattern, which refers to the series of attacks that are performed when spamming light and heavy attacks. Block cancel is a community-driven term that refers to utilizing blocking to reset a weapon's attack combo back to its beginning in order to achieve an optimal attack combo. In the case of the Devil's Claw swords, their parry can also be used to reset attack animations and is therefore referred to as a parry cancel. Perfect parry specifically refers to the Devil's Claw sword parry special move. Parrying an attack less than 1/3 of a second before it hits you achieves a perfect parry, which has massive block cost reduction compared to a normal parry. Push block angle refers to the angle in which you can shove enemies and the various angles you can block their attacks. Your push angle is the front 180 degrees of your character model, while your block angle is in a 360-degree radius around your entire model. The front 180 degrees is referred to as your effective block angle, as all attacks blocked within this radius will cost the normal amount of stamina for that attack. Attacks that fall outside of your effective block angle, or the back 180 degrees, can still be blocked, but will consume double the normal amount of stamina. Armor piercing refers to specific attacks that can do damage through carapace armor rather than just bouncing off of it. All heavy attacks of all melee weapons in the game have armor piercing, while some weapons have armor piercing on their light and special attacks. Soulblaze and Burning refers to the damage over time effects within the game. Soulblaze is applied by Psyker's special weapons and abilities and is marked by blue flames, whereas Burning is applied by Zealot Flamers, grenades, and weapon blessings and is marked by orange flames. Peril refers to the status Psykers gain as they cast their powers from the warp. Attempting to call upon your warp powers while at 100% peril will cause you to trigger perils of the warp and go down. Warp Resist refers to stats that reduce the amount of peril generated from abilities that increase your peril. The higher your warp resist is for something, the less peril you will generate performing that specific action. Suppression refers to the status that is applied when shooting towards your enemies or when they shoot at you. Suppression versus enemies will cause them to stop firing and either cower in place or run to cover, while suppression versus players will heavily reduce your ranged accuracy. Suppression only affects ranged weapons and has no effect while in melee combat for either side. Coherency refers to the passive aura that detects how many allies are near a player or group of players at any given time, which can be seen by the shield icon in the bottom left corner. Being within an ally's coherency aura grants you passive toughness regeneration that scales for each additional ally that is within your coherency radius, and can also grant various buffs and boons through a team's aura abilities and other passive and active perks found in the skill tree. Weakspot is another name for headshots, spots that allow you to deal extra damage to enemies when you hit them, which is also used to refer to the Beast of Nurgle's weak point on its back. Corruption refers to the purple bar that reduces your maximum health pool. There are two kinds of corruption, basic and grimoire. Grimoire corruption comes from picking up grimoires and can only be reduced by the curio perk of Grimoire Corruption Resist. Throwing away a picked up Grim is the only way to completely remove this kind of corruption. Basic corruption comes from taking direct health damage from either Tox Flamers or infested enemies, such as Poxhounds and Poxwalkers. Basic corruption can be removed by Medicae stations, health stims, various skill tree perks, and can be reduced by the curio perk of Corruption Resist. If you have any other terms that might be confusing for newcomers, be sure to leave them down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and thanks to this month's Patreons for their continued support. Make sure to like and subscribe for more Darktide guides like this in the future. See y'all next time!